president.
Okay. Well, actually, I got to attend one of the very first conferences at Howard University back in I think it was the early 1980s. And when we were, again, a relatively small organization and emerging at that point, I think I served on the governing board as a representative for a couple of years. Believe it was in the late 80s or early 90s, but probably the biggest stint was serving as vice president from, I think, 1999 through 2003. The last 2 years of that was actually that we were under a new system where you'd be elected as vice president, president-elect. And so then I served as president from 2003 to 2005, and then you get one more year as past president to sort of wrap things up and then move on.
And what did you want to accomplish during your presidency?
Well, during that period, we were exploring the whole idea of introducing global into planning education. It was a period in which we had an emerging global planning interest group, and it was obviously, because of my own interest, something that I thought was important for planning educators. We were also again, this was another, they reoccur many times, the budget challenges at universities, and so a lot of our programs were feeling the challenge of being a master's and maybe PhD program and concerned about enrollments. There were more planning programs, so there were need to sort of spread the students around, and so there was a concern about the future of planning education. We were diversifying our planning body. We were introducing more new PhD students, and so during my term, there were a lot of initiatives that actually had gotten started before, supporting the PhD program, and supporting PhD students through workshops in the summer, and also to support junior faculty to get into the publishing area effectively. And again, strengthening our interest groups, the Faculty Women's Interest Group, the Emerging Interest Group for faculty and students of color, as well as this global initiative. So there was a lot of changes going on, and in fact, we had changed the bylaws of the association, which is why we suddenly had this VP, president-elect, the terms were more specifically laid out. So the idea was more continuity and a little bit more, I guess, order, if you will, in the administrative structure.
Sure. And so during your pregnancy, what do you consider your biggest
My pregnancy.
presidency?
Yeah. No, not yet. I'm working on that.
What was that like? Tell us. I want to hear more
Yeah.
about that.
During your
You know.
Yeah, I want to know more about that than
What do you consider your biggest accomplishment?
Well, it was actually probably getting through one of our biggest challenges as an association, because there was we actually had to move our annual conference from Charleston to Kansas City because there was concern about the fact that Charleston, South Carolina, which is Clemson, had been the host for that conference, decided to pull out. Again, the controversy over continuing to fly the Confederate flag at the state. We were going to do education programs around that, but to make a very long and complicated story short, the decision was made to not go to Charleston for the conference and move it to Kansas City, a more central and we thought less controversial, although there were issues there as well. I mean, I think one of the things about planning educators is they are engaged. They're engaged not just in their scholarship and their teaching, but what's going on in the larger society, and that was part of it. And it was a challenge, but we again, the organization is resilient, and we did okay.
That's a huge undertaking. What would you like to see the ACSP, accomplish in the future, and what do you feel are most need of change?
Well, I actually think it's been changing quite effectively and responding to, the association seems to be responding to changing values of students, the way we communicate with our members. It's gone very I'll say high tech, maybe it's actually moderate tech as far as the different generation is concerned. But I think that represents an effort to be responsive to the way educators operate today. It's much bigger, and I think this threat to schools is always going to be there because we tend to be smaller programs in large institutions or smaller programs in smaller institutions, and so there's always that challenge to keep planning education on the front burner. We still haven't gone global yet. We still really haven't done, we haven't really sort of put American or US planning education within a global framework the way I had hoped we would a decade ago. But our student body is diverse, and certainly, definitely more international students there. And the fact that they may come from a particular country outside the United States doesn't make them global either. It makes them part of their own tradition, and so it really has to be broader than that. But I think ACSP is always been very responsive to changes taking place in the larger world. The one thing I caution is to need to sustain the sense of community that ACSP. Again, I remember. Again, it's always a place where, as a young faculty member or as a planning student, you get to, in a very informal and a very engaging way, connect with the people you read about, the people whose stuff is important to you as whatever area of planning you're involved with. We've gotten larger, that's okay, but again, finding ways to keep that connectedness, I think, is really very, very important, and I think we can do it, but I think that's always an ongoing challenge.
Sure, sure. Excuse me, sorry. Any last final thoughts for the audience that might be watching?
No, I think I've said it. I think I said enough.
Yeah, yeah. I like it.
I couldn't think of anything cute to say.